Are you ready for today's story? Because this one starts like a simple fighter competition and ends with corrupt executives, wrist-breaking hand cranks, Finnish miracle mechanics, and Japanese fighters that could outturn anything, right up until they caught fire. This is the story how the US Navy picked the wrong airplane, the right airplane saved the war anyway, and the third airplane confused everyone badly enough to get a lot of people killed, until somebody figured out how to cheat death with matchsticks on a kitchen table. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. It's 1935, and the US Navy finally admits the obvious. Biplane fighters are finished. They want a modern monoplane interceptor, fast, agile, carrier-capable. In one corner, you've got Grumman, already famous for building rugged Navy aircraft that could take abuse and come back for more. In the other corner, you've got Brewster Aeronautical Corporation, a company that started out building horse carriages and car bodies. Now, logic says Grumman wins this, right? Wrong. In the initial fly-off, Grumman's prototype was actually slower. Brewster's design hit just over 300 miles per hour, and the Navy looked at the numbers and said, "We'll take that one." That airplane became the Brewster F2A Buffalo, and that decision aged about as well as unrefrigerated milk. Here's the thing, early Buffaloes weren't bad airplanes. They were light, responsive, and agile. Marine ace Gregory Boyington famously said the early models could turn and roll in a phone booth. But then Brewster collapsed. Not figuratively, organizationally. Their factory in Long Island City was a multi-story nightmare where parts had to be hauled between floors by elevator. Production crawled. Quality control disintegrated. And management? Oh, management was something else. The sales operation was run by the Miranda brothers, men who had already served prison time for illegally selling weapons to Bolivia. Congressional hearings later revealed a factory plagued by strikes, suspected sabotage, and, this is real, allegations of sexual trysts inside unfinished aircraft fuselages. They literally nicknamed the plant the Bucks Country Playhouse. Meanwhile, the Navy kept adding weight, armor, radios, fuel, more equipment. The Buffalo's already fragile landing gear began to buckle under its own mass. By the time the war began, it was no longer a nimble fighter, it was an overloaded liability. At Midway, Marine pilots flying Buffaloes were annihilated. Captain Philip White later wrote that any commander who ordered pilots into the air in a Buffalo should consider the pilot as lost before leaving the ground. And that should have been the end of the story. But it wasn't. Before the Buffalo got fat and miserable, the US sold 44 of them to Finland. And the Finns turned this failure into a legend. They called it Taivahelmi, the Sky Pearl. Finnish mechanics diagnosed a major engine flaw and fixed it by doing something brilliantly simple. They inverted one of the piston rings. That alone transformed reliability. Flown light, maintained obsessively, and handled by masters like Hans Wind and Ilmari UT Lion, the Buffalo achieved a staggering 26-to-1 kill ratio against Soviet aircraft. One single Finnish Buffalo airframe was credited with 42.5 kills, possibly the highest scoring fighter airframe in history. Turns out the Buffalo wasn't trash. It was just buried under bureaucracy. Now, let's talk about the airplane that didn't win, but saved the day. After losing the contract, Grumman went back to the drawing board and produced the Grumman F4F Wildcat. It wasn't fast, it wasn't elegant, but it was indestructible. There's a reason Grumman earned the nickname, the Iron Works. The Wildcat's cockpit, however, felt like it had been designed by someone with unresolved anger issues. The landing gear was manual. After takeoff, the pilot had to crank a handle 30 to 31 turns to raise the wheels, slip, and the handle could spin backwards and break your wrist. Imagine dogfighting while nursing a shattered arm. But Grumman was unmatched at practical problem solving. When the Navy complained that the Wildcat took up too much deck space, Leroy Grumman grabbed an eraser and a paperclip, mocked up a folding wing angle, and invented the stow wing, allowing carriers to pack 50% more fighters. No committee, no study, just a paperclip. Early in the war, Allied pilots believed they were fighting Zeros. Often, they weren't. They were fighting the Nakajima Ki-43, known as the Oscar, sometimes called the Army Zero. It looked similar. It flew even tighter. The Oscar used special butterfly maneuvering flaps that let it turn inside almost anything in the sky. But, to stay light, Japanese designers skipped armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. It was an aerial ninja, a glass ninja. If you hit it, it didn't limp home, it usually exploded. The problem was, neither the Buffalo nor the Wildcat could outturn it. Try to dogfight one, and you were dead. The Americans needed a new way to fight. That solution came from Jimmy Thatch. At night, sitting at his kitchen table, Jimmy used matchsticks to model combat geometry. What he came up with became the Thatch weave. 2 fighters, mutual support. If one was chased, both turned towards each other, forcing the attacker into the kill zone. He tested it with Butch O'Hare. It worked. Perfectly. Japanese ace Saburo Saki later described attacking a Wildcat, pouring hundreds of rounds into it. For some strange reason, he wrote, the airplane did not fall. The rudder was shredded like cloth, but the Wildcat kept flying. A Japanese aircraft hit like that would have been a fireball. The Wildcat refused to die. The Buffalo was a nimble sports car ruined by corruption, then reborn by Finnish brilliance. The Oscar was a masterpiece of agility made from paper and gasoline, and the Wildcat? It was a wrist-breaking, hand-cranking flying brick built by a guy with a paperclip. But it held the line when nothing else could. And, as history keeps reminding us, sometimes the best airplane isn't the fastest one. It's the one that brings you home. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.